Chloe, I am so excited to be kicking off the Know Better, Do Better series with you.
Me too. This is going to be great. A great year.
Two financial planners getting together and just giving the real to everybody. Like, get ready, you guys.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, and I'm so glad that you asked me to co-host with you for a few episodes this year.
All right, so without further ado, let's just start giving it to the people. At the top of every show, we're going to do what we call trends, taxes, and tea, where we will be either telling you the latest trends, telling you how to save more and pay less, or just giving you some good old fashioned tea about something happening in pop culture that has to do with money. Today, we have a trend. Chloe, tell us all about the trends that are happening right now.
Yeah, so today's topic is going to be home ownership, and so one trend that we've kind of seen, especially since COVID, is that home ownership numbers have remained steady, and millennials represent the largest number of home buyers. So this is something that's very interesting because here we are in the times of COVID, people are losing jobs and just having some serious financial troubles, but yet the housing market is just out of control. And people I know that are buying houses are saying that they're selling so fast, and it's just so hard to find a house right now.
Yeah, I've had
So
tons of friends
yeah,
that have been like, "Oh, I'm in a bidding war," or "I put my
yeah.
house on the market and it sold for $5,000." Actually, the one I've heard the highest was like $500,000 more than what they put it on the market for. Just
Wow.
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's been interesting. And I think there's a few reasons for the uptick and a few reasons why the numbers look the way they do. First of all, we have to remember that there are some foreclosure and moratoriums that exist, and same thing with like evictions if you're renting. There's some protections that are in place for renters and for owners, homeowners. So I think that kind of is skewing the numbers a little bit. But in addition to that, just looking at just the total market, the rates are low. We have historically low rates, and so a lot of people are considering homeownership just because it's perceived as more affordable with low interest rates.
Yeah, I
Um,
think but people have to be a little bit careful when it comes to affordability because, right now it's COVID, we're spending less on entertainment and dining out. Some people even were able to save their whole down payment
mhm.
specifically because of that. So you don't want to buy more house than you can afford just because your discretionary spending is lower and then go back to, pandemic, post-pandemic life and your lifestyle and your expenses increase.
Yeah, exactly. So that's something that to definitely be thinking about. Another thing is that people are working from home a lot more since COVID, and so
Mhm.
I think if you work in a small space, especially if you have a spouse, if you have children, if you have pets, it can get a little tight. so, so people are wanting to get outside more, just to have the space to set up a home office. There are a lot of companies that have permanently gone to working from home now, since they found that it can actually work well. So I think that's another reason why people are wanting to move. They want more space.
Yes, but you have to be careful. You have to do it right. And that's what this episode is all about. We have so many things we want to share with you. We want to give you the real about home ownership so that you're not making mistakes because we know that when you know better, you now have the opportunity to do better. And that is why our main topic today is going to be buying versus renting. But before, I just want to talk about, kind of why we picked this topic as the first. So, Chloe, you wrote an article fairly recently, and we're going to put a link to it in the show notes. And there was a little backlash to this article because you talked about the decision to be a renter instead of a homeowner. So we're going to come out with some real life examples to tell people what you need to be thinking about before you jump off the bridge and say, oh, it's definitely better for me to buy than it is to rent today. But tell us a little bit about what happened with that article.
Yeah, the dreaded article. So I wrote an article a few months back about renting versus buying. It talked about the pros and cons, and I told a little bit about my personal story. I bought my first house when I was 27, and I stayed in that house for about 9 years, and I sold it a couple of years ago, and I'm renting again, and I couldn't be happier. Just with I'm less stressful and just overall happier, and so I told a little bit about my story, and then I talked about when it makes sense to rent versus when it makes sense to buy. And if you're going to buy, some of the things that you should look out for based on my experience. And also just, both of us, we both talk with clients all the time, prospective clients, friends, family, and people who want to buy a house. And not everybody's in the best situation to buy a house. So just based on that experience, I really wanted to write something to give people a little bit of food for thought. And I received a ton of backlash. And it kind of made the rounds, actually, to the point where it was number 7 out of 10 for the top 10 personal finance articles that were read on Business Insider last
Get
year.
it, girl. Right. So it was a really interesting article, guys. That's a pretty big feat to accomplish.
Yeah, there were like over 2,000 articles written, and I was the 7th most read, which was very interesting.
So we say all that to say that we know that this is a hot topic. You may not like everything that we say today, but take it as food for thought. Because there's a lot of clickbaity information out there. And that's kind of how this series was born, is there's so much misinformation in the world. We spend a lot of time as financial planners researching, understanding, and just knowing what, typically works best for people. So that's what we're going to dive into. And I know somebody is already rolling their eyes like, I cannot believe these are 2 adult young women that are financial planners and they're talking about renting. Everybody knows that buying a house is an investment. So let's just kick it off with your primary residence. Is it an investment or not, Chloe?
No, it is not an investment. It is a lifestyle decision.
Mm. Tell us more about why buying a home and living in it as your primary residence is a lifestyle decision and not an investment.
Yeah, a lot of people, I think, we look back before the major housing crash, probably over a decade ago now. And even looking at, today with just housing market being out of control, a lot of people just see a house as something that you can live in and just flip it pretty fast. And, you can move in a few years and make a lot of money. But really a house should be, it's one of the biggest purchases that you'll make in your lifetime. And it's probably one of the biggest loans that you'll take out outside of student loans, because we've seen some big student loans
right.
that could be a mortgage. But yeah, it's like if you're going to make that big of a decision, you really need to think hard about it and make sure that, just make sure that you're prepared for it. It doesn't always end up being a home run. You don't always walk away with hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you do the math, sometimes even if you do walk away with $100,000, which I walked away with over that, it once you factor in all the money that you put into the house, the commissions that you pay, it's not as much as it seems to be.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make is we focus very much in the moment. What can I afford right now? What do I have to pay right now? Can I afford what I'm paying right now? And we tell ourselves what the narrative says, that, I'm paying this mortgage every month. I'm building equity in this home. I'm going to sell this house for more than it's worth. And all of those things may be true. But you have to do the full math. That's only part of the story. You gotta do the whole set of, what could I have done with this money instead? How much has the house appreciated? How much has houses all around, appreciated? And when it comes time to sell, like, I've got to also incur some costs. So some questions I think you should be asking yourself is, number one, how long do I plan to stay in this home? Because generally people say that you need to stay in a house at least 7 to 10 years in order to actually make it a good financial decision. So we're not going to say make it profitable per se, but for it to be a worthwhile financial decision, you shouldn't be setting up shop and then planning to move in 2 or 3 years. Sometimes life takes us different places, career opportunities, spouse career opportunities, etc. They call us the crazy millennials because we're all over the place doing this, that, and the third. But what do you think about that, Chloe, the whole idea of 7 to 10 years?
Yeah, I always tell clients, if you're going to buy a house, make sure that you can stay there for at least 7 to 10 years. Because if you're there for 2 to 3 years, like you said, a lot of times you might, even if you do sell it for, some sort of increase in value, like by the time you pay the commissions, you just really, you might barely break even, or you might end up having to come to the table with money. So that's just something to really think about. And also, just like you said too, think about flexibility. That's a huge thing, a huge
Mm-hmm.
factor is that goes into your decision to rent or buy. If you have a job that, you have to move around a lot, even if you travel a lot for work, do you want the hassle of having to maintain like a big house, while you're traveling all the time? If you like
Right.
to travel personally, do you, and you're not going to be at home much, do you really want the responsibility of having a house? Um, just having that flexibility to get up and go and break a lease really quick is a lot different from having to actually sell a house.
Mm-hmm. It is night and day, the two things. It's never fun to pay fees when you need to break a lease, but imagine, like you said, a house sitting and you having to shell out money for a mortgage for a house that you're not living in. You
Mm-hmm.
have to pick up. It happens all the time. You relocate to another place pretty quickly. And you're like, what do I do? I don't even have time to really put this house on the market. And then you try to put renters in it. Then the renters stop paying their rent. Now you're a slumlord instead of a landlord, and you thought it was going to be a great kind of investment property. You're like, I can swing this from afar. There's a lot of things to think about when you're buying a house and you have to change, pivot real quickly. So,
And something I'll mention too is that not every neighborhood allows renting. Like I lived in a neighborhood that had an HOA, and we didn't allow renters. So that I knew that going into the purchase, and I was okay with that. Because they did a lot of things that help, like with the property value of the house and or the neighborhood, and make sure that the property values were protected. So HOAs aren't always bad. I have friends who have condos and or townhouses, and they have a certain percentage that they allow to rent. So, you might be in a situation where you need to rent, but you're number 30 on the list of
mm-hmm.
people that are allowed to rent. So you can't rent your place yet. So those are things to think about for sure.
Yeah, I want to just drive home too that while we and Chloe don't want to be painted as negative Nancy's, but I think there's a lot that's not said when someone is marketing something to you. And home ownership is something that is marketed to people because it is a profitable business. So whether you're a realtor or a mortgage company, there's all the different people that would be maintaining your home. Like it's a trendy topic for a reason. So we're gonna go and cover some of these downsides of home ownership, not because we're just trying to talk you out of it, but we really want people to know what you're getting yourself into, and are you really ready to take on all of that. And as you were just talking about condos, I was thinking of a story that you and I both heard recently of a young lady that was stuck in a condo. They hadn't been collecting any fees at all, and then they all of a sudden levied this what is it called that they do,
Oh yeah, the special assessment.
exactly, a special
Yeah.
assessment where they were going to have to come up with tens of thousands of dollars at the drop of a dime, like, and it was like over $100,000 over time, but it was like, we need $20,000 from you right now because we never were we were never collecting any HOA fees, or we weren't collecting the proper amount. They had no reserves, and now they had to do a major repair for this condo. So it's not
Hmm.
all sunshine and rainbows when you're a homeowner.
Yeah, and one of my friends purchased the condo, and she was like, one of the best pieces of advice that you told me was to ask if they have reserves in their HOA for the condo. And as a result, they had to do some major work on the property, and they had the money to take care of it.
Yeah, you're counting on someone else to, manage the finances of the overall property. And there's a lot of questions that you need to ask. I would say one of the other downsides of homeownership is unpredictable maintenance and repair costs. So frequently my clients get caught up on this. And so frequently I got the bad side of the stick as it pertains to the homes that I've owned in the past. So as an example for myself, I had a rental property and, was barely, breaking even, getting ahead. It was like $200-300 that I was getting on a monthly basis as quote unquote profit after everything
Quote
was
unquote.
taken care of. So at the end of the year, I've accumulated $3,600. Well, it doesn't go very far, $3,600. And the very long story short of it is that when it came time to sell, I needed a new roof, a new $18,000 roof. And that business did not have enough reserves to cover that roof. So guess who had to go into their personal emergency fund because the business, like I just didn't run it right. I didn't have it all set up. I didn't know better, so I couldn't do better. That's what. um, But
And what if you don't have the personal emergency reserves?
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's a thing that so many people, and like I said, that was a rental situation, but it happens with regular home ownership. Water heaters break and sprinkler
Yeah.
systems go crazy. The actual water, some things other people don't realize is that like if there's a flood or something like pipes break underneath, like you can't just call the city to come fix that. Like those are your pipes that you have to fix.
Mm-hmm.
So really old neighborhoods, like one that we previously lived in, like that was a problem. A lot of people in the neighborhood were actually having to dig up pipes and get it, and I was like, oh my goodness, it's only a matter of time before this also happens to us. And I'm so, I'm so glad that I found out that this was a financial responsibility that was on us, not on the city,
Mm-hmm.
so that we could prepare for it. And luckily, that didn't actually happen. But all sorts of things happen. So
Yeah, and if you're handy, if you enjoy doing yard work, if you like getting on a ladder and cleaning out your gutters, or like or all the things that you have to do, it might not be as expensive, but you still want to make sure that you're prepared for the true cost of home ownership
mm-hmm.
and all the things that can break and all the things that can happen.
And I think that brings up a good point about this value of time versus value of the actual dollars. You want to outsource, well, that's going to increase the cost. But if you want to do it yourself, you're going to have to spend all Saturday up on that ladder cleaning those gutters, or comes time to paint the home and or touch up little things like that. You're going to have to set aside time. So what is your time worth, and would it be better spent making money in your main job instead of doing these things kind of on the side? But overall, it's going to be an expense one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, or even just doing something that's more fun. Like, do you want to watch a YouTube video about how to fix your pipes, like underneath the sink? So, and go to Home Depot and have trial and error to figure it out. So
Yeah, I think this is one version of opportunity cost, but there's some others as well.
another opportunity cost is, as far as like the downsides of home ownership is, I mean, there's really kind of three major costs that exist when you have a house that don't exist when you rent. So the first one is, the down payment and closing costs when you buy. So you have to save up money for those things. The second is the ongoing maintenance and repairs that you have to take care of, on an annual basis. And then the third thing is when you sell, you pay the commissions. So those are three things that you don't have when you rent. When you rent, you just go sign your lease, pay your rent, and keep it moving.
Yeah, where
So
where weren't we just talking and you said that the stove went out and they're just gonna bring you a new stove? Like,
Oh yeah,
imagine.
oh yeah. I've had in the last 6 months, my refrigerator started freezing my food for some reason, and so I wake up in the middle of the night and hear a big bust, and my Lacroix cans are all over the refrigerator, and
No.
then yeah, and then my stove stopped working, and so both of those appliances fixed, and I didn't have to worry about it. I just called maintenance, and they came, less than 24 hours, and I had new appliances. So
Ta-da! Imagine if you're a homeowner and something like that broke. I hope you
yeah,
have the however many hundreds or thousands that it costs to fix that appliance and get a new one
exactly,
going.
exactly. I mean, I'm at the point where it's like if a light bulb is out, I call maintenance, and they come
Oh,
replace it.
it's like your own personal concierge.
Exactly. Like I don't even go to I won't even go to Target or Home Depot and buy my own light bulbs anymore. Like it's just not something I have to deal with. So
Yeah.
but yeah, going back to the cost, so like there are those three costs that are associated with the home, and so you have to kind of weigh the factors of, if you weren't to buy that house, you wouldn't have those costs. When you're buying a house, you have to save up the money for the down payment. That could take a few years, and that's money that you're not saving for, retirement, or for the long term, that you're keeping in cash, that you're having to set aside. All that maintenance, that extra money that you're spending each year on maintenance, that's money that you could be investing and saving. So, if you put that money, in the market, or if you save it some other way or invest it versus sinking it into the house, and potentially just getting your money back, it's kind of, it could be a forced savings vehicle, essentially, is what, a lot of times houses are. It's like you just get that money back that you put into the house at the end of the day. You could be earning a lot more by investing. So you have to think about, whether or not that makes sense to you for you.
Yeah, I love what you just said about it's a forced savings vehicle. So often that is exactly how I try to describe it to clients is yes, you are building equity. Yes, there will be something to come out of it unless we have a big, crazy 2008 type situation. But, the house is not going to appreciate at the rate that your investments would appreciate. 9 times out of 10, like I said, you can sometimes luck up on a situation, that's exactly what it is luck. It's not that you're making the best investment ever buying in this neighborhood right here, right now. You have no control over what the market is going to do. And houses don't typically appreciate over time at the same rate that the market would appreciate. So what are you doing? You're saving just like you would in a savings account. Savings accounts aren't that risky. So you don't get that much interest. You don't get that much, additional back. And you just got to keep that in mind. All right. So let's switch. Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I was just going to add real quick too. If you do decide that buying is something that is for you, really think hard about whether you want a single family house or if you want a townhouse or a condo. Again, this is not an investment decision, because there are, some people say, okay, with single family homes hold their value a little bit better, but you really need to think about what's the best for your lifestyle, and so if you're a single woman like I am, like I had no business getting a single family home because I don't like to do maintenance. I've never used a lawnmower in my life. like, I'm not handy. So I had to pay people to do all those things, and it was very frustrating. So I'm probably when I do buy again, which I will at some point, I'm gonna get a townhouse. So
yes, do what is appropriate for you, not what they say is the next best thing to do because you're an adult. Adulting does not mean you need a big yard and a big this and a so on and so forth. And think about what your lifestyle needs and how much you're going to use those things for sure. Yeah. All right, let's transition to talking about some of the common mistakes. So, we talk downside, but those are not necessarily mistakes that people make. Those are things you just need to think of before you want to, decide, do you want to be, 1 foot in or 1 foot out? Now, mistakes, on the other hand, are, like we bumped into quite a few things that people do that they maybe should have thought through a little bit more before purchasing a home. So what is something that comes to mind when you think about some of the common mistakes that happen?
Yeah, the biggest thing that I see is just not having your financial house in order, and pun intended.
Literally.
I think a lot of people, they want to buy a house and they have this narrative in their head. It's like, I'm renting, my lease is almost up. Like I need to buy, I'm not going to renew my lease. I can't keep throwing money away,
Throwing money away on rent. If I hear it one more time.
But yeah, it's like if I have to move again, I have to move into a house. Like I can't move into another rental. It's like they just put their foot down, and it's like a lot of times, some of these people might have credit card debt. They might not have an emergency fund. They have 6 figures in student loans, and if you're going into a house in that situation. Even if in having bad credit too, if you don't take care of those things before you get into a house, you're just setting yourself up for financial disaster.
Amen, amen, amen. So I just want to circle back to a few things. So credit card debt is bad debt. That means you are overspending. You accumulated that debt because you cannot make ends meet with your monthly income. So to go and purchase a home, you probably don't have savings when you have credit card debt. And now you're taking on, but I need to furnish that home. And, what if something breaks in that home? So when we talk about like why we don't think you should purchase a home when you have credit card debt, it's like you've already had a, hey, warning sign, credit card debt is bad. Also, I'll just throw in, this is not what this episode is about, but keeping that balance on your credit card is not a thing. Like so often I hear people saying, well, I'm keeping the balance to keep my credit good. So they're keeping 30% of whatever their, total ability, what is the word?
Utilization.
Yes, yeah. Total utilization available so that they can actually, like they think you pay your credit card bill in full every month and you will have great credit. Which brings me to the second point you mentioned, like, people who have bad credit. Yes, you can purchase a home if your credit is not great. But guess what? You don't realize in that moment, you're paying more in interest. You're paying more in fees. You're going to probably have PMI because you had little savings, or you have this credit card debt and you put very little down on the home. And you're going to have a bigger mortgage because you put so little down. You have very little skin in the game, bigger mortgage, bad credit already. You're going to pay a lot more than everyone else over time. So it may just seem like 1%, but 1% on a couple $100,000 house adds up to quite a bit. So reasons that we want you to clean those things up before you jump into a homeowner or home ownership is because it actually saves you money over time.
And a lot of people too, they think, okay, I have my emergency fund, so I can go buy a house, and they wipe out all their savings to buy the house. And that's another big mistake I see, because once again, it's like if you move into that house, 9 times out of 10, just about everybody I know, including myself included, within the first 6 months to a year of buying a house, something broke. Or something had to be fixed.
It is almost a guarantee. Even if you build brand new, brand spanking new, like something gonna break.
Exactly. So it's like if you're in a situation where you've basically wiped out all your savings and put it towards this down payment and the closing costs to get into this house, and something happens, or even if you lose your job, if anything could happen. Yeah, but just not having that savings is very dangerous. So in addition to your emergency fund, you need to have, money saved up for the down payment, for, all the moving costs, the closing costs, to buy furniture and decorate or do some minor cosmetic repairs like painting and things that you want to do to make the house, your own. So that's something that you really have to pay attention to your situation and understand what your numbers look like. How much you can afford based on what you calculate and what your goals are, what you want to achieve.
And not what the mortgage broker tells you, not what the realtor tells you, not what you're approved for, because those are not the same things as what you can actually afford.
Yeah, they're not thinking about the life that you want to live. They're not thinking about how much if you like to travel, or if you want to, save a certain amount or retire, early. They're not thinking about all that.
Yeah.
When they're telling you how much they say you can afford.
Which is why financial planners are great, because they don't look at your finances in a silo. So realtors look at it in the silo of how much can you get, or the lenders, estate planners, if you pass away, what happens here? Insurance people, all they're looking at is how much insurance you need. Like certified financial planners looking at the full financial picture to say, okay, in light of all the things that you're trying to accomplish, this is what this is my best recommendation, thinking ahead on your behalf.
And keep in mind too, all of these people, whether they're the real estate agents, the mortgage brokers, they make commissions. And so the higher the loan, the higher the sales price of the house, the more commission they make. So, they have an incentive to push you into more.
It is so true. And so there's this term called house poor. Can you just break down for us, like, what that means and what exactly happens when people end up being house poor?
Yeah, and that's another big mistake that we see people make, is that they just buy way too much house, based on someone else telling them what they can afford, or just really just stretching their budget beyond what they should. And so what happens when you do that is you become house poor. And that means essentially you have this nice big house, and most of your money goes to maintaining that nice big house. You can't really live your life and do all the fun things you want to do. You can't go out to eat with your friends all the time, and you're having to cook meals at home to save money, or you can't travel as much as you want to, or just basically live the lifestyle that you want to live outside of this house.
Mm-hmm. You are so right. So right. One thing I think we haven't talked about much, we've kind of talked about people before they get into a house, you should know this, but if you're already a homeowner, there's also some mistakes that you can make that would cause you to be like, I didn't do the best thing, the thing that was in my best interest, but maybe you don't even realize it in a moment. Do you have any examples of stuff like that?
Yeah, there's so many mistakes that homeowners can make in regards to refinancing. So I think it'd be good to talk about a few of those.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that I think about is this cash out refi. A lot of people are doing the cash out refi now, and they don't realize that they are taking equity literally out of their home to go fund some other thing, whether that be a house, vacation, etc. Some things are fixing up houses, but you really need to be clear about what you're doing when you decide to cash out, and take some equity out of your house. Sometimes people are paying off credit card debt. Once again, you're like, well, it's a high interest, and my house is low interest. But one thing to think about too is that your credit card debt is not tied to anything. Whereas your house is tied to the collateral being your home. So if something goes bad with your finances, they can take your home away. While it's not great to have credit card debt, they're not taking your home away. You're not going to not have anywhere to live because you have that credit card debt. So that's definitely one thing
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, like, when you think about cash out refinances or even consolidating debt, those two things can be good or bad depending on how you use the money. A lot of people see the equity in their house as like an ATM machine, and so they just want to take out equity as much as they can. Or they might refinance several times in a short period of time, taking out equity. And so when we talk about, a lot of people tout, housing and homeownership is building wealth, a way to build wealth. And it's like if you're constantly taking out equity in your house, you're not building wealth. Like that's just not how it works. So so you have to think about that. And like Lauren said too, just moving debt that's unsecured, which is like credit card debt, personal loans, things like that. If you don't pay those things, yeah, your credit gets dinged, but they don't take anything from you. And having that debt tied to your house, if you don't pay that, that mortgage, then yeah, your home gets taken away. So
Yeah.
that's something really to think about.
Another thing I think too is that people don't do the math. So we talked a little bit earlier about this idea of like, what happens in the moment, and you being able to compute, oh, my mortgage is going down monthly. So you've been paying on your house for 7 years. You had 30 to go. Well, not 30 to go. You had a 30-year mortgage, so you only had 23 to go. And now you do this refinance, and you refinance it again over 30, and you're like, oh, this is so much relief. It's gone down. But what happens when you stretch it out over 30 years again? You may have dropped your interest rates, but it might add back up over the time. And that's a calculation that a lot of people can't do on their own to really understand, is like, yeah, it's a lower interest rate, but am I actually saving money over time? You got to be able to think
Yeah.
about those things.
Yeah, and I think too, just looking at once again, these people who try to come to you and solicit these refinances, they're making money. Like that's how they make money. They drum up these refinances, or they work with people who are getting a mortgage for the first time. So if you're getting calls on a regular basis to refinance, and the rates supposedly lower, and you're going to save all this money in interest, they're not telling you that your amortization schedule starts over. If you're 7 years in, you're probably at the point where you're just starting to pay a decent amount of principal each month, which means you're actually building more equity. And so when you start over, you're paying more interest than principal. And so that's something, and then you're stretching out the length of the loan, if you've been in there for 7 years. So you might actually end up paying, more interest at the end of the day. So just, I'd say a good rule of thumb is, consider refinancing if you can save at least like 1% in your interest rate.
That is really, really, really good advice. And like I told you all, we're not trying to just like negative Nancy you, Debbie Downer. Um, we we really want you to have this information so you know what to think of, so that you can make better decisions when someone comes to you and says, ah. So, but there are some good things as well. So, Chloe, can you tell us about like a good reason to refinance? We kind of talk good and bad a little bit, but there's some like good reasons that could help you out when you do a refinance.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, just going back to the cash out refinance, I think if you're going to make improvements on your home, like if it's, if it really is like a forever home or a long-term home, you might want to make improvements, here and there, just to make it more comfortable for you. And it could be things that'll help, appreciate the value of the house. And so that's something that could be good, to take out money for that reason.
What
And
about
so
eliminating mortgage insurance?
Yeah, that's another good one as well. So depending on the type of mortgage that you have, and like with FHA loans, which is what a lot of people take out if they can't put the 20% down, you can't. Yeah, well, there's some rules based on how much you put down and just how the time that you took out the loan, because the rules kind of change a little bit from here to there. But yeah, just it depends on when you've taken out the mortgage, but you might have to pay that PMI for a minimum number of years, like 5 or 10 years, regardless of if you've gotten to the point where the equity is more than 20%. And so the only way to get out of that is to refinance. And so that's something you might want to look at if you're taking out a loan and you're paying PMI. At what point does that PMI automatically drop off, or do you have to refinance out of it?
Yeah, that's a super duper good tip, because a lot of people don't even realize they're paying PMI, which is basically something that happens when you put less than a 20% down payment on your home. So one other thing I'll say too is if you do refinance, try to pay the closing costs out of pocket,
Yes.
instead of rolling them in. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's another thing too, that talking about building equity. If you're at the point where you're taking out cash out refinances, and you're taking money out of your equity, you're extending the term of your loan, and then you end up rolling the closing costs in. If you didn't have a lot of equity to start with, and then you're rolling the closing costs, that's basically eating up more of your equity. So you can afford to pay those closing costs out of pocket. And a lot of times what happens when you refinance a mortgage, you skip a payment. So you have a month, where that amount of your mortgage could go towards those closing costs, for that month that you're skipping. You also get a refund if you pay escrow for property taxes and insurance. The old lender will send you a refund from your escrow account. So when you add those two things up, the skip mortgage payment and the refund, that a lot of times equals, or it's pretty close to what your closing costs would be. So, I mean, instead of just taking that money and spending it, then, you could use that to offset the closing costs.
That was a gem. I hope you all are taking notes, because these are the little things that, like I said, a lot of people are just not aware of as it pertains to home ownership. I think we did a really good job of laying out for people how they can know better so that they can do better. Are there any kind of closing thoughts you think of as you consider home ownership, buying versus renting? What do you want to tell everyone?
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway is just make sure that you make the decision to buy based on what's appropriate for you. A lot of times we do get pressured into doing things, or we feel like we have to do things to appear successful. But at the end of the day, we as financial planners are just wanting to help you live your best life, and you have to define what that is. And so if you do that, I think, and you also make sure that you're taking care of your finances, calculating numbers yourself, crunching the numbers yourself. I think you'll be in a good position either way.
Living my best life. All right, as we close,
I'll say too, it is okay to rent. It is not a bad thing. You're not throwing away money. You can still build wealth while you rent, and all that money that you would spend towards a house, you could be investing that money. So yeah, it's okay to rent.
What she said, y'all, it is okay to rent. You are not creating a cardinal sin. You are not a bad adult. You are not throwing money away by renting. You are making the decision that is best for you. So often I hear people talk about how much they love to travel and they want to travel more. And what if, your rent and versus what you're paying on the house on a monthly basis, plus all the expenses, et cetera. What if one was double the other? You could actually say oh, I could take the other half. So I got a $1,500 rent, or I have a $3,000 mortgage. That $1,500 is a whole trip every single month that you could be going on. So think about what's important to you, and how can you work your finances to do that? All right, so we're ready to close out with today's money quote. It is, you can't have everything you want, but you can have the things that really matter to you. And this quote came from Marissa Mayer. Chloe, tell me what you think about this.
Yeah, I think, searching for a home can be tough when you have a budget. Just even personally, I remember I had certain areas of town that I wanted to live in, and, you have the small little radius of where you want to live, and then you look at what's realistic based on what you can afford, and that radius gets bigger and bigger. so,
Mm-hmm.
so just really, it can be frustrating, but think about, what's important to you. Make sure you prioritize the things that are important to you. And even when you're looking at houses, you might not get all the features that you want, but think about what can you improve on later. Can you buy some new appliances down the road if you don't like the way the appliances look? Or can you paint these walls, or really do things that are inexpensive to make it your own, instead of trying to buy a house that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah, I really, really love that. For me, as I think about, you can't have everything you want, but you can have the things that really matter to you. I go back to like just general goal setting in my life. So I am one of those people that travel is super duper important to me. And I want to be able to kind of pick up and go as I please. And so, I have a home that would make people like, oh, you're an Olympian, you're a financial planner, and this is the house you purchased, sort of thing. Like, definitely have been judged by some of my Olympic friends that have come to visit and saw the home that I chose to purchase. But for me, it was a decision of I was able to pay cash instead of this cash going toward a down payment. I got a much smaller home, but I have no mortgage. And so I can do that pick up and go because I just got to come up with property taxes and insurance every year. And, now I have freedom to, work in a way that I want to work, to kind of design the life that I want, because I don't have a lot of expenses. I will always have a roof over my head if I need it. I can, work at a minimum wage job and earn enough to kind of cover that property taxes and insurance. But I also can pick up and go as I please. And what I do is I take advantage of Airbnb in that way as well. So that, the house doesn't have to just be sitting empty. Like, you can do all the things that you want. You just have to decide what really matters to you. If travel matters more than having a big fancy house that your friends can see, then do what makes sense. And, maybe you could be debt free. Like, we always think of a house as something that no one can ever pay cash for, but it's not a big fancy house. If you save the right down payment and you buy in the neighborhood where you feel like this is something I can afford and I can live a life here.
Yeah, exactly. And my last little gem that I'll give
Mm-hmm.
is going back to refinancing. That's kind of relates to what you just talked about. Oh, and, if you are at a point where you feel like you're in your forever home, and you can refinance, save a lot in interest. Think about going to, if you have 20 years left, or 22 years left. Think about going to a 15-year mortgage. If paying off your home is something that's important to you. I just helped clients refinance. They had about 22 years left on their mortgage, actually, and I helped them refinance to a 15-year. Their payment only went up about a couple of $100 a month because they were saving so much on interest. And now just the idea that they're going to have a home that they own outright in 15 years, like, they're at peace.
Yes, chop 7 years off. And like you said, while it seems wonderful for that payment to go down, it's okay for it to go up, because what happened over the last year or the last 8 years for that client, they probably got increases in income. So it's a lot easier to afford their regular mortgage and that extra couple $100 a month. And like you said,
Yeah.
the piece that you get to know that, like, oh, I just chopped 7 years off and save myself X number of dollars, can be really wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
And that puts you on track for that retirement plan. So I was like, oh, what if I can match up my mortgage to my retirement? Now more than ever, we're buying things later. You might not be done paying your mortgage off by the time you retire, which is a kind of a standard goal that a lot of people have. But what if I get really aggressive and I do a 15-year mortgage instead? Then that makes the possibility real.
Exactly.
All right. This is episode 1 of many. I hope you all enjoyed this. And Chloe and I can't wait to bring you more information all about all the topics where we need to know better so that we can do better.